this specificity. Yeah, the odd generalist is fine, but in the real technical areas in particular, these folks really do need to know what's going on. And again, just to go back to the example I was giving earlier, in areas like IBS, for example, where pain is one aspect of this condition, there's been a tremendous amount of thinking amongst the opinion leader community, the advisory committees, and therefore ultimately the FDA as to how you define pain, how you measure pain. You've really got to have people that understand that thinking, that can influence that thinking, and can therefore crystallize that into a clinical trial protocol. Just going with the generalist is not enough. So that would be my main comment, I think, Lynn, around the importance of real specific knowledge in entrepreneurship.
And I'll echo those comments with what I've heard is a story about one of the early very successful biotech companies, Amgen, who over the first several years of their operation in Southern California tried time and again to kill their programs that ultimately ended up being their most successful drugs, and filgrastim and GCSF, which became multi-billion-dollar blockbuster drugs, both of them. But they didn't have the ability to predict that. I think they thought rifaport might end up being a $20 million drug when they first started out. So it kept falling off the radar screen, but somebody in the back room kept it going. It ended up with a company where R&D ended up calling the shots over the marketing people at the end of the day, I think. But it sort of illustrates what might have worked 20 years ago in starting up new companies. I would suggest that Amgen would probably have been shot in the head by the venture capitalists when they, after some failures and other things in the portfolio, because people are looking for ways of minimizing how much money they have to put in the company. And those were constraints that weren't there earlier, is not to blame venture capitalists or anything. I think they're doing the best jobs that they can, but their constraints are that they need to show return fairly quickly in their portfolios. I think, and as a result of that, one of the things that's happening with new company startups, I took a poll of this at dinner last night with some attorneys who work on new company startups as well as CEOs. Many of the companies that are getting started today that are having Series A rounds are companies that the venture capital groups have actually incubated in-house. Taken somebody like me who has some experience, and hopefully can do it again. But we're getting paid a relatively minimal salary, maybe working as a consultant half-time to bring a company forward for a period of a year or two to demonstrate feasibility, to get through some of the risk-reducing milestones that Stuart talked about a few minutes ago. And before they're willing to put in substantially more money, and then managing things in a very virtual way. It used to be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that a CEO or an entrepreneur would walk in and would be expected to build a management team very quickly to take 20,000 feet of space in Cambridge or South San Francisco or something, and build up a juggernaut of an operation that would be successful just because of who they had working there, all the different shots on goal they were taking, et cetera. And I think things are much more surgically organized today. I think it is important to have money behind the company early on and to build credibility around the team that one builds and the science that one has in order to be able to attract some of that rather scarce venture money as you go forward and try to build it.
And I would just add on that, I can't stress enough how important I think management is to investing in biotechnology companies. As we all know, they all have their ups and downs, and frankly, how people manage through crisis and through the downtimes, I think, are equally important, if not more important, than how they do on the upswing. So at the end of this day, this is still a people-driven business, and somebody has to pick up that ball and run it down the field, or design the studies, or bring the team together, or finance a company. So I think management, from that standpoint, straight through is it's essential to success.
Thank you. So here's another question. We always hear that investors are looking for de-risked programs, but what are the greatest risks? Are they technical, regulatory, or commercial? And how can startups work to mitigate some of those risks?
To me, the biggest risk for a startup is all those things are there, but boy, it's syndicate risk to them. And in fact, as we go into early stage deals, the ideal situation is to have the same date, because we have the ability to carry it forward. But that, to me, has been one of the biggest difficulties early stage companies have had over the last 10 years, and that's been syndicate risk, getting the VCs just to be working together, but also to know their timing, to know their reserve policies, to be there in a way that can deal with not just the upside of a situation, but importantly the downside, which you're going to face with all those other points, regulatory, clinical risk, because we are taking it all the time as a partner.
Should biotech startups build specifically to get bought by big pharma? Stuart, Walter, what's your game plan? Are you headed in that direction? Is that a goal?
I'll be brief and just offer that I've always thought that you shouldn't do that, in the sense that you need to do the same kinds of things in earlier stage companies to be successful as you would if you had a notion that you're going to be bought tomorrow. And in order to do good deals with companies that might be interested in buying you, have to look like you actually can be independent, go forward at some level. But I think, particularly today, where it comes to building marketing organizations and so forth, that there are probably fewer companies that are going to be able to do that. And to the extent that you can do things more virtually, it certainly leaves your options quite a bit more flexible for looking at what different ways that you can be successful for your investor group.
I think you've got to have an eye to what the exit is going to be. I mean, if you're a venture investor, you have a number of limited partners who are pension funds, endowments. These are people that are not investing out of charity in you. They're expecting to get a return, and a return that is substantially higher than what they could do by putting their money into some kind of S&P tracking index. So that's the financial comment. But I guess the other thing is that I'd say two things. One is you've got to be investing in areas of unmet need. There's no point, I think, in doing a Me Too or a fifth in class, despite the fact you may be able to make a commercial case for it, because you won't be addressing a need for patients, for physicians, and therefore, by extrapolation to some extent, the pharmaceutical companies as well. So I don't think if they start out by thinking, I've got to get acquired by a pharma company, but I think if you're focusing on an area of unmet need, areas of medical importance that are going to make a difference to patients and physicians, by default, pharmaceutical companies should be interested in that. I think the other side, though, is that you also need to be, as a privately backed company, whether you're doing it through creative sources such as Walter's been describing, whether you're using venture, whether you're using government money, it is, at the end of the day, it's a limited pool. It is a finite resource, and you can only go so far. So if you're going into areas which require huge clinical trials and potentially vast numbers of patients to prove a safety signal, for example. I mean, we've seen loads of cases of this out there in the press, some not very pleasant, of companies being hauled up because a safety signal, a cardiovascular signal is shown up, they're being told to go off and do thousands of patients to prove that that safety signal does not exist. That becomes very difficult for private companies to get into those areas, because frankly, unless you can put some of these questions to sleep, the pharmaceutical company, even a big pharmaceutical company, is unlikely to want to take on that kind of risk. So, yeah, I think you have to have an eye to where is the area of unmet need, and to a certain extent, is there going to be an acquirer or a public exit for you? Otherwise, you run the risk of running out of